single word for being here this morning. We stand here together with all of you to emphatically proclaim our vision in one single word: enough. So Bob and I founded this Act Against Hate Alliance to bring leaders and stakeholders from all backgrounds together with a goal to identify and execute solutions that will stop the spread of hate crime. The state of California has been recognized globally for its leadership in many areas through its history, including environment, energy, education, healthcare, health, and human rights. It is therefore very fitting, most fitting, for us to inaugurate this Act Against Hate Alliance here with the Golden State Capitol as backdrop. So we will not just stand by and wait for change. We will bring all the best together to help make the change for all of us Californians. And we are unanimous in one voice, saying there's no place for hate in our state.
Madam Pro Tem.
Well, May, thank you. And to the former Republican leader who I consider a friend, thank you. And to our Secretary of State who's letting me go out of order because we have session, my good friend Fiona Ma, let me thank you. And don't worry, Josh, and Rosalicia, I'll make sure you're okay at 10 o'clock. No worries. Look, it's important that we are here. We have a lot going on, it is true. But the sign says it all. Hate is not welcome here. And I am thrilled to be part of the start of this alliance. As May said as I was walking up, prejudice and hate have no place in our communities and no place in our society. And the fact that we have to continue to say that is astounding to me, but it's true. And so, you know, what we have seen, the continued racist attacks against Asian Americans across our nation is terrible. It's terrible. It's unacceptable. It has to stop. So the work being done here today is important. Bringing an end to violence takes more than people speaking out against injustice. It takes action, and it takes action with intentionality. And it takes continually reminding people of what's at stake and what our values are.
Now known for her patience and working across the aisle, I'm pleased to introduce Treasurer Fiona Ma.
Thank you very much, Bob and May, and to all my colleagues. As you can see, this is a nonpartisan issue, right? We have East and West and North and South representatives and just everyone coming together, and I appreciate our allies for standing with our community. The last 3 years has been really tough, especially on our seniors. I live with my father, and trying to protect him during COVID was a big concern of mine. And then the Asian hate crimes started. And then we had to try to protect them when they did go out on the streets. And now it seems like it is happening all over, not only to our seniors who have been attacked at bus stops or while they're shopping, but now it's just our friends. A friend of mine, Greg Chu in San Francisco, got attacked in front of his condo in the South of Market last week, and we all came out to rally for him.
Thank you. And thanks again to everybody here, including all the volunteers to help stabilize the sign back here. It's kind of tough when you get a new sign and the sleeve is too tight to fit the rod. But as May said, it's all about working together to accomplish a greater good, and that's what as a society we need to do. 18 months ago, there were some killings in Atlanta that captured the imagination of the nation. We had 8 people killed, 6 of them Asians, and it was put out that they were targeted because of their race and gender. Now, we've had a growing awareness of hate crimes in the last few years, and it has spiked a lot, but this is nothing new to our state or our nation or actually the world. In 1871, the city of LA had a horrific massacre of 19 Chinese, 10% of the population at that time. And after they ended up hanging 15 of those, they went and plundered all their homes, even cut a diamond ring off of one gentleman's finger. In 1882, this backdrop of hate led to the systematic institutionalizing of hate with the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. And it took 60 years before we were able to repeal that, and another 20 years beyond that before we actually started admitting more Asians into the US. So we've come a long way from then, but we have a long way to go. Hate is not limited to Asians, and we will focus our attack on hate wherever it forms. I want to mention that this effort is made possible by many of the legislators that were here before because they funded a program at the California State Library called Stop the Hate. And they put money where everybody's mouth is and allowed different people to come up with different ideas and competitively go after those funds. And we do appreciate the state of California's effort in this. You can find more information on our website, which is live, called actagainst-hate.org. Hate is learned. And if it can be learned, it can be unlearned. That is our mission. Thank you all for coming here today.
So good morning, everybody. I'm former State Senator Bob Huff, and I'm the program's MC today. This is the first in a series of monthly media briefings hosted by the Act Against Hate Alliance with grant funding from the California State Library's Stop the Hate program. For most of our media attendees, English is their second language. So I'm asking our presenters to speak slowly. It's very difficult at times. I will turn the program over now to my wife, Maymay, for a few opening remarks. Maymay? Unmute yourself.
That's right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mamie Huff, and together with my husband, Senator Bob Huff, we are honored to launch this series and extend our deepest gratitude to all of you for your attendance and support. What you just saw on your screen were a few clips from the bipartisan Capitol kickoff of our Act Against Hate Alliance that we held last month on the California State Capitol lawn. In addition to the speakers you just saw were former Senate Minority Leader Pat Bates, Senators Josh Newman, Brian Daly, Rosalicia Ochoa-Boak, as well as numerous community leaders. Senator Huff and I have been very committed to public service throughout our careers. Bob served in the local government in Los Angeles County for 9 years, and then in the California State Assembly and Senate for another 12. He was the Senate Minority Leader working across the aisle to improve lives and outcomes. My career has involved business development, government affairs, and community leadership in California and internationally. Together, Bob and I created Huff Strategies to focus on our skill sets listed above. But more recently, we established the Act Against Hate Alliance to better focus on the deplorable rise in hate crimes. Hate crimes touch us all. The principal mandate of the Act Against Hate Alliance is to identify effective solutions to stopping hate crimes. Each segment of this series will bring together stakeholders and thought leaders with a cross-disciplinary focus, along with members of the media, to look at what is happening, to analyze causes, and then with each segment to begin our focus on solutions. Now back to you. Thank you. Bob.
Thank you, Maymay. Our speakers in this first of 10 monthly briefings each bring enormous experience to this program, and it's a great honor to have them with us today. We hope to have time for questions after our guests present, so please type any questions in the chat thread throughout the program. Also, for our media friends, and most of you are media related, please put your name, contact information, which organization you work for in the chat if you haven't done so already. You may recognize a change in our presenter lineup as we originally published a list that included Councilmember Peggy Huang, who is a Deputy Attorney General associated with the Asian American Civil Liberties and Anti-Defamation League. Peggy had to accommodate a judge's change schedule, those things happen, and could not be with us today. She did, however, work hard to find us an exceptional replacement. Our first presenter is that replacement, Deputy DA David McMurrin. David has worked as a Deputy District Attorney in Orange County for the past 8.5 years. This past year, he's worked in the Special Prosecutions Unit, which includes handling Orange County's hate crimes. Prior to being in the Special Prosecution Unit, David served in the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit, Please welcome Deputy District Attorney David McMurrin. David, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I wanted to speak today on the topics of kind of enforcing the law, the laws of the hate crime laws that we work with in California specifically. And there's a few of them, and I'll kind of mention them and then kind of speak in generalities to help you guys understand at least kind of what prosecutors, what we're looking at when we get police reports, when we get potential hate crimes, kind of what we're looking at, what we're using to determine if there was an actual hate crime that was committed. The three main penal codes that we look at are Penal Code 422.6, 422.7, and then there's a Penal Code 422.75. Those are a typical three elicited, enumerated penal codes that talk about hate crimes. But essentially, to be a hate crime, what we're looking for is it was an act committed where they used force on a person. Was there a threat portrayed to another person of physical violence that also included the ability to carry out that physical violence? Was there damage to property, defacing of property, or also was there another crime that was committed? So any potential crime we can add to being potential hate crime if those acts that were committed interfered with a person's right. That's established by the law, that's established by the Constitution in California, or a right that's established by the Constitution of the United States. Typically, what we're seeing for most of the crimes that our office is getting, the right that's being violated is usually the right to be free from harm, from violence, from bodily harm. So somebody's committing an act that somehow interferes with that free exercise of being free from violence or bodily harm. And that act had to have been committed because the defendant is biased against someone, or the suspect. That suspect had to have been biased against that victim for a few things. It could be any, could be multiple, or it could be one of these things. But they needed to be biased against that person based off of that person's actual or perceived gender, their disability, their nationality, their race or ethnicity, their religion, their sexual orientation, or biased against a person who is associating with a person or a group that identifies with one of those characteristics. I want to talk a little bit about just highlighting the fact that it's actual or perceived. They don't have to be correct in their hate, in their victim, who they're attacking. They could think that they are a person of a protected class, of a specific race, and get it wrong. But because their act or their crime they're committing is based off of what their perception of that person might be, that's still a hate crime. That act also, that bias that we're saying that this person has against that protected group, they need to be motivated. That bias or motivation that they have has to be essentially the cause of why they committed that act. We have to prove that bias against that person's gender, sexual orientation, race was the motivating factor, a substantial motivating factor in why they committed or did what they did. So why they might have hit a person, why they might have damaged a home's windows, it's based off of that victim's protected class, their race, their ethnicity, or sexual gender. If it's based off of another reason, potentially not the hate crime that we're able to charge. The law talks about if a person, and we're often seeing these in maybe neighbor disputes, they have multiple reasons for committing an act. Maybe they didn't like each other. Maybe there's a typical neighbor type dispute, but they're also that neighbor, or that victim that they're acting against is a member of one of those protected classes. If there's more than one reason for why they committed the act or committed that crime that they did, it's still that gender, that bias, the ethnicity, race, the protected class needs to have been the motivating substantial factor still. So it has to be the main reason why they're committing that crime. And I'll talk about a little bit later, but that's typically where we see some inability to charge more hate crimes than what we're kind of given, kind of incidents that are brought to our attention. But usually, without going into case specifics, open cases that we currently have, a lot of those cases that we have or deal with a person committing violence against another person. Usually it's in the public, person's walking down the street, being at a park, you're open, you're out with your family, not expecting to be a victim of a crime. But because that suspect, that defendant has a bias against women, we've seen women being committed hate crimes against, being pushed into the middle of the street, hoping they get hit by cars, just due to the fact that they're out in the street and they're women. People based off their sexual orientation who've had prior relationships with people, but due to the fact that the suspect, the defendant in cases, don't agree with his sexual orientation, his choices he made, he approached him as he got out of a car and he's attacking him. We've had victims of security guards who are working in a park trying to protect, the park goers, the kids who go to parks, and approach a person who's being disrespectful, saying bad things, and based off of his ethnicity and his perceived ethnicity, that suspect and that defendant, swung a skateboard at him, trying to hit him with a skateboard. We've elderly couples based off their race. There were Asian elderly couple that were attacked out of nowhere just because they were an Asian couple walking in the park. Those are typically the hate crimes that we see that we're able to charge. You do get some vandalisms against persons' homes, immigrants, people going against them because of they disagree with immigration policies or disagree with them being able to be in our country. You do see some of those where they're defacing the properties, things like that. There is a difference between hate crimes and what we'd say is a hate incident. When I say what hate crime, I'm saying is I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt one of those penal codes, the 422.6, 422.7, any crime that's added with a hate element, which is the 422.75. That to me is a hate crime because that's something that is out in the legislator in the penal code that I could charge as a crime and go after a person for violating that crime. And I believe I can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a lot of hate incidences, unfortunately. There's a lot of racism. There's a lot of bigots out there that are somewhat protected by freedom of speech. So sometimes issues that we have, which I would just say is a hate incident, not something we can prove, are people exercising their freedom of speech, unfortunately in a manner that could be offensive, that is offensive, that's appalling to most people. But they're exercising their freedom of speech out in a public place, and they're not doing it in an intimidating manner. They're not threatening violence. They're not threatening harm. They're passing out propaganda, flyers. A lot of the cases that we get that we are unable to prove that would be more of an hate incident are related to things like that. Typically what we're seeing, what we're coming across. It's unfortunately or fortunately, you could look at both sides, is that we do have the freedom of speech and freedom. A lot of that speech is protected. And so a lot of our incidents don't relate into actual violence being occurred. There wasn't a destruction or property damaged. They're exercising their freedom of speech. But with that kind of caveat that I do want to say is when you're looking, if you're reporting, you see something, you say something, it doesn't feel right. And I believe law enforcement would agree with me, is report it. I talk about the differences in crimes versus incidents just briefly and don't want to spend much more time on it, only because I don't want you or members of the public to make that determination. I don't want leave that determination of a hate crime versus a hate incident to the professionals. to law enforcement that deals with it every day, to prosecutors like myself that are dealing with it, who know the law and can look at things. And just because maybe we can't prove a crime because you reported an incident, saw something that you believed was a hate crime, and we might just can't prove it, doesn't mean that doesn't help us in the future. All documentation of interviews with those defendants, those suspects, it gets documented, reports that get submitted to us for criminal proceedings. Even when we don't believe we can prove that case, we keep record of that. And so one instance might be not a provable hate crime, but 2, 3, similar when you keep adding book and making book on a person and seeing that, hey, this isn't just some coincidence, or this isn't just some neighbor dispute or some road rage incident. This is actually, look at these last prior incidences where they're picking out the same type of protected class, that same individual, and they're going after them. Now we might have enough incidents to now charge hate crimes because we can use that against them, that prior behavior. That might not be enough in our current case, but could be something in the future. So I always promote and recommend, regardless of what you think it is, please report that to law enforcement. Let us handle that. Let us take the case and make an ultimate determination whether it actually was a hate crime or not. And some of the things that we kind of see, which kind of is a differentiation in hate crime and also incident, is when we're filing a case, we're filing cases based off of beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the standard that we have to prove to 12 jurors unanimously. And we as an office have to believe that we can do that when we file criminal charges. It's a different standard than when an arrest is made. That's a lower standard. Beyond reasonable doubt is a very high standard, and that's also something that doesn't go into our consideration when we're moving forward. And it's high, and especially with not necessarily as much with hate crime cases, but there is a perception against law enforcement, a disbelief in law enforcement, where things that aren't recorded, things where we don't have multiple witnesses. It's really hard for us to get in front of 12 jurors and to get a favorable outcome where we can get 12 unanimous jurors to agree if we only have a he said, she said type thing, when we have lack of corroboration, lack of additional witnesses who said, yeah, he heard this, he said this, she said this, or he also did this. And that's one of the challenges that we face sometimes as well, is unfortunately, we don't have enough evidence sometimes to prove the case. So it might not be that we don't believe that an incident occurred, but we're also looking at a prosecution side, having a good faith belief we can prove it beyond reasonable doubt. So if there are reports that are made as well, it's important to, for people to know to stick around. The more witnesses, the better, that can talk about what they saw, what they heard. The more evidence we can get, the better it is for us. I did do a hate crime trial last year. And we didn't get the hate crime allegations found true. A jury did not believe it. They found him not guilty of it. And it was a case where a defendant made admissions, where I believe he had essentially admitted to committing his act based off the female's race and what he perceived that to be. But it wasn't a recorded statement. It happened in the jails. It wasn't on nothing was recorded. An interview wasn't recorded. The surveillance that captured his act didn't have audio. And at the end of the day, the jurors found him not guilty. And that's kind of what they said is, we didn't think we had enough proof to believe the officer's word alone when the defendant testified and denied making those statements. And so sometimes it's just a lack of corroboration if we decline to file kind of charges. It's just that standard is really high. But on a prosecutorial side, I love as much evidence as we can get. And I know in Orange County, we don't take these hate crimes lightly. There's a special unit that we have within our unit that handles these. So we are in tune with our jurisdictions. We specialize in knowing these crimes, knowing what can and can't prove, knowing case law. A lot of times case law comes into play as well when we're looking at whether we can prove a crime or not. If defacing of a school with, racist symbols or things like that, can we make that a hate crime? And it depends. Unfortunately, it depends on where it was, who was their victim, things like that. But all that goes into the legal side. And so knowing that there's hate crimes versus hate incidents, to me, report it all. It doesn't matter what you think it is. Let the professionals decide, make that determination. Because if I can prove a hate crime, I'm going to charge a hate crime. So that's what I have today. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, David. Appreciate your comments, and I'm sure there'll be questions for you later. I see some of them populating the chat box. Again, for our reporters present, if you have questions for David or any of the other speakers, please pose them in the chat box. We'll call on you later. We may have to do a little triage and won't be able to get to them all, but we'll try to pick some of the better questions. So thank you again. Our second presenter is Detective Jan Wong. Detective Wong is a hate crime coordinator for the LA County Sheriff's Department, operating out of the Major Crimes Bureau Hate Crime Task Force. To put this in perspective, LA County is larger than 40 states in the United States. The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department is the largest department in the nation. LA County is a majority population, with 74% of the population considered traditional minorities, with many of those populations clustered in ethnic enclaves. The breakdown is 48% Hispanic, 26% white, 15% Asian, 8% African American, and identifying as 2 or more races, 3%. Clearly, we are a very diverse population in LA County. Prior to becoming a sworn peace officer, Detective Wong worked for the department as a crime analyst and assisted detectives with criminal investigations. As a deputy sheriff, she worked in custody division administration, where one of her primary duties involved drafting and revising departmental policy. During her patrol assignment at Century Station, she worked in an ethnically diverse community and was part of the station's county area special problems team. While part of this team, she attended community relations meetings, assisted in numerous public outreach events, and also met with local government officials and residents to help address quality of life issues in the community. As a longtime resident of Los Angeles County, she has a vested interest in ensuring the safety of the community, especially in relation to those who may be impacted by hate crimes and hate incidents. Detective Wong, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you to everyone else who is participating and here today. Again, I'm Detective Jan Wong. I'm the hate crime coordinator for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Hate Crime Task Force, which operates out of our Major Crimes Bureau. First of all, before we get started into my topic, which is essentially what law enforcement is doing to stem the rise in hate crimes, I would like to just give a very basic understanding that a lot of the information I'm providing is specific to the Sheriff's Department. There are many different law enforcement agencies based off of where you live and where these incidents may occur, and everyone has different policies and how they handle, hate crimes or hate incidents. For example, we're actually one of the few agencies, albeit one of the largest in California, that takes hate incident reports. So we do actually take hate incident reports and not just hate crime reports. So again, just, want to give people an understanding that a lot of the things that I'm speaking on is specific to the Sheriff's Department here in LA County. Again, so LASD is composed of 23 patrol stations. We operate all the LA County jail facilities and provide policing for the LA County courts, parks, and community colleges. Again, so any crimes occurring out of our area are subject to be handled according to the policies and procedures of whatever agency's jurisdiction that hate crime or hate incident may have occurred in. So an example of this is, a hate crime occurring in Monterey Park wouldn't actually be handled by the Sheriff's Department. That would go to Monterey Park PD. However, a hate crime or hate incident that occurred in Rosemead, for example, would be, because Rosemead falls within our jurisdiction out of our Temple Station. So I just wanted to give that clarification and understanding for everyone to understand, because especially, when you do reports, for a call for service for a hate crime or a hate incident, so you have a better understanding of who I contact. It's going to typically be the law enforcement agency of where the incident occurred. All right, so part of our response as a department in regards to helping curb the rise of hate crimes was to form the Hate Crime Task Force. So the Hate Crime Task Force, which I'm part of, some of our primary functions include tracking all hate crimes and hate incidents that occur within our jurisdiction, reviewing all hate crimes and hate incidents that occur in our area. So for me, that literally means I read every single hate crime and hate incident report that any of our deputies on our 23 stations or in our jails take, just to verify that they were properly documented. There's additional information that we need because we do provide our stats and information to DOJ, and just make sure everything's thorough, that the report taking was thorough, that the investigation was thorough by the initial deputies that took that initial report. So another thing that we do is to also assist detectives with their investigations with relation to hate crimes and hate incidents, just to make sure that, you know, they have all the information that they need. So really we're a resource for other detectives as well. We also provide training and guidance to deputies and stations regarding their handling of hate crimes and hate incidents, just so they get a better understanding sometimes. I know there's certain stations where hate crimes and hate incidents might be a little more prevalent than others. That said, we're there for them. We're a resource for them at the Hate Crime Task Force. We additionally coordinate with every other unit station within the department and are in frequent contact with their designated hate crime coordinators to ensure that all policies and procedures are up to date and that we're just providing them with updated information and resources that might be available for the public and the community. Additionally, another big step that we take as a hate crime task force is to collaborate with outside agencies, whether that be law enforcement, the district attorney's office, and community-based groups and organizations like this. A lot of that is just to promote and foster positive relationships, be think tanks essentially to get ideas for, hey, what might be working with one agency versus ours, and just to bring more awareness to hate crimes and hate incidents that are occurring in our areas. That said, the two biggest steps that I could probably say that we are taking as law enforcement, at least within our department, to help curb the rise in hate crimes is, two basic things: education and collaboration. In regards to education, we've enacted department-wide education and training related to hate crimes and hate incidents. The biggest one just includes internal organization education from the ground up. So between myself and my partners at the Hate Crime Task Force, that includes, providing classroom lectures and scenarios at our Sheriff's Academy. So every deputy sheriff that comes through off the streets has to attend a 6-month police academy. And during that time, they do receive a block of training on hate crimes and hate incidents, how to recognize these types of incidents and crimes, how to respond, how to contact victims, what information you need for your report, all that stuff. So that happens at the Sheriff's Academy, and then it happens again at our 3-week patrol school. So the Sheriff's Department is a little bit different in the sense that when you go to the Sheriff's Academy, most of us would have had a custody assignment at a station or jail, at a jail before you go to a patrol station. So before you attend your patrol training out on the streets, you do go through a 3-week patrol school, and we give a block of training at that time as well. So I actually just did one last week, and the basics that we're trying to encourage those deputies to learn and points that we're really trying to hammer home are understanding and recognizing what a hate crime is, how that differs from a hate incident, and how we as a department expect those reports to look, what actions they're going to be taking, the questions they're going to be asking when they are speaking with victims of hate crimes or hate incidents, and things like that. We also, the next level up, also teach at supervisor school. So for people that are going to be field sergeants, the actions that they take as supervisors when they're the people that are reviewing the reports, or if they're responding as a supervisor to maybe a major incident that involves a hate crime or hate incident. So for us, education is really important, just so everyone understands that, we do have policies and procedures in place related to how we handle hate crimes and hate incidents as an agency. Basically, things that we are really trying to push when it comes to what we're teaching our patrol deputies out in the field, who really are going to be the people. If you call a police station, you call 911, or you call station for assistance reporting a hate crime or hate incident, we're going to encourage the deputies when they go out, to give the victims time to express their concerns and feelings, because we know how traumatic these types of incidents can be. So we express the importance of these types of cases and how we prioritize them as a department. And we want the deputies that are actually engaging with the victims to convey that to them and not think that, we're brushing this off, that, it's not important, because it is. Another thing that, like I keep hammering home, is just that we are properly documenting these hate crimes and hate incidents. I know, just to kind of piggy off what Dave was saying earlier, that's very important for the process later on, if there's criminal filing, things like that, an arrest, et cetera. Another reason that's important on our end, at least, is for tracking and data. So we want to know which groups are being affected, which groups were being, this hate act was towards. And that way we kind of understand what the trends are in certain areas. And if there's, a rise in certain hate crimes or hate incidents towards certain groups, then we know as an agency how to better effectively use our resources, whether that's, more patrol, more community outreach, different things that we can do to help target rising hate crimes or hate incidents in certain areas. So like I said earlier, another huge step that we are taking as a law enforcement agency, in addition to education, is going to be collaboration. So that includes collaborating with outside entities, but also community-based organizations. I know us as LASD and the Hate Crime Task Force, we frequently collaborate with our LAPD counterparts, who are the other large, law enforcement agency out here in LA. And we're in frequent contact with, their essentially version of us, just to see, what they're doing, what their agency is doing, what works for them when it comes to reporting. Sometimes we have common issues. And I think people don't understand. They just think, oh, it's LA, the police are going to handle it. But, really, we share borders with some of these people. So it's good to know, what's going on in their agency and their areas, because, it could very well affect us, or, it might be if it's a spree, if it's a guy that is committing hate crimes or hate incidents across different jurisdictions, it helps with us to be able to communicate with them to better understand and apprehend some of these people that are committing these acts if they rise to the criminal level. So that said, LAPD also fostering relationships with other municipal agencies. So like Alhambra PD, Monterey Park PD, other agencies that aren't under our two umbrellas. Additionally, we also have a great relationship with the FBI, and I know they're hate crimes people. We speak with them frequently about certain cases, things like that, as well as the district attorney's office. I know here in LA County, they have a hate crime section, probably very similar to what Dave works in the cases that he handles. And we do, we work with them, get their guidance on how to best improve our cases and our reporting and things like that from the ground up. So we frequently collaborate with them. So all of this really just comes down to, understanding the trends of hate crimes and hate incidents throughout our area, across all neighboring agencies, to better address them. We also do resource sharing sometimes, because, us, we're a larger agency. So if we're able to possibly assist, a smaller municipal PD's agency with any of our resources, and that could be anything like our SEB, which is our SWAT team, or, Aero Bureau, but even down to us, if we have maybe some more detective resources or investigative resources that we can assist them with in regards to hate crimes and hate incidents, then that's what we're here for. But really, it's just creating a network and fostering, that relationship with them. But another thing that we also do is, collaborate with community organizations and groups just like this one. I know we work with the Anti-Defamation League, LA versus Hate, and 211. So for us, it's a big part of helping to curb hate crimes is really just engaging with the community and getting public involvement. So it is, doing community meetings like this that are open to everyone and fostering good relationships. And, like Dave was saying, and I'll piggyback off what he was going with, is just encouraging people to report, hate crimes and hate incidents. I know, even for me culturally, as an Asian American, sometimes, people don't feel comfortable maybe reporting hate crimes or hate incidents. And I think, that's our part of what we're trying to promote as a department, is to encourage a positive relationship with the community. So people do feel comfortable that if they come to us with a hate crime or a hate incident, it will be prioritized, and that we will do what it takes necessary to help investigate and, make them feel safe. That said, we provide different ways that people can also report hate crimes or hate incidents. They can use 211 in LA County or Crime Stoppers. So we do like to provide different resources that would make people feel more comfortable in the public to report any hate crimes or hate incidents that they've been involved in. So those are pretty much the basic steps, the big things that we're doing. But like I said, education and collaboration, I would say, is really big on at least our end as the Sheriff's Department in LA County.
Great. Thank you so much, Detective. We appreciate your insights, and I'm sure we have some questions for you later on.
Of course. Thank you.
So our final presenter before we go to questions is Regina Wilson. So Regina previously worked for the California State Board of Education as a communications consultant. 10 years ago, Regina and some colleagues founded California Black Media, where Regina serves as executive director. California Black Media serves an important role of helping to expand coverage by working with many Black media outlets to help push out relevant news to a larger audience with a more unified voice. Regina, thanks for joining us today. The microphone is yours. Regina. Is Regina still with us? Unmute your mic if you're there. Okay, well, Regina seems to have stepped away. Let's
you should get a
No, the microphone, I think, would not let me unmute.
Oh, there we go.
So there we go. No, thank you so much. And just a minor correction. Actually, California Black Media was started by my father and my mother over 20 years ago. I don't even want to date myself because it was so long ago. So I'm probably going to get the numbers wrong, but we're definitely over 20 years old. And I actually revived it after, I don't know, 2012. I was actually dubbed, that when you're in, when your family does, or has organizations that they're a part of or businesses, they say, hey, you've been in Sacramento, you will be the person who takes this on. But, I went to Sacramento to really have a good understanding of how government worked. And I was fortunate enough to be part of the Schwarzenegger administration and was fortunate enough to work in education at the highest levels and saw the disconnect of what was happening. The things that were happening in Sacramento weren't trickling back down to our communities fast enough. And so I just basically took the years and the skills that I learned while I was in Sacramento and was able to transfer that and help put California Black Media on the map as one of the most premier, news service agencies and advocacy organizations that supports Black-owned media throughout the state. But with that being said, I think that we all are here today because we have seen the things that have been gone on in the news. We have seen the hate that has risen. And I think that, the Black community feels the pain that the API community, other communities feel around hate. And as Speaker, our Senate Pro Tem Atkins said earlier in this program or at the kickoff event, why are we still having to talk about this, right? We're still talking about things that I teach my kids today, that I hope that I've taught them well in kindergarten, in first grade. You don't have to hate people. You don't want to say it. Don't say you hate your sister. Don't say you hate these things. And you're hoping that we're teaching that across the board so that when people, grow up and become citizens and we actually join into the world, we learn how to better deal with each other versus spewing hate, and understanding how to manage our feelings and understanding how to manage issues that arise just because we're human. And so I think that some of the things that David said earlier when he first talked were very intriguing to me, because in my own newsroom, my colleagues and I are talking about what's hate and what are incidences. And I think the reason that May asked me to be on this call today was really to talk about the media's role in this, because the media plays a very, very, very important role. And we know that things can be magnified to a place that doesn't allow us to talk. We have more things that are in common than we have that are not in common. We have more relationships that are, that people don't normally think that you have, that I can sit across the aisle with someone like May and they wouldn't even know that we would have a relationship where she can call on me and ask me for help. They wouldn't think that I would have the same relationship with a Sandy Close, who runs Ethnic Media Services, who I also see on this call, that works amongst the gamut of different ethnic communities. We're all looking to make sure that we're able to protect our sovereignty and tell our narrative and tell our story. And today, I think my call to this, and one of the things that we are looking at underneath the grant, the library grant that we were funded, was one, to provide technical assistance, and not just to the African-American publications, but we offer it to everyone. We really have been, I don't want to say struggling, but really just looked at what are these things about where communities live, where people are. The work that we're focusing on is making it so that leaders and community know each other. So whenever something goes down, if somebody steps on somebody's toe, it doesn't go from 0 to 100, like I'm going to start a shootout or I'm going to hit you in your face. It comes back down to a place of being able to have the elders in the community be able to help mitigate and stop some of the hate that we see, that the officers have talked about, the things that they see. We know that we won't be able to stop it. It's human nature. People, there's certain things that people will hate people for certain reasons. But what we hope is that we can create community to be connected well enough so that if there is a problem that arises, you can call me. I'll put my number in the chat. Not that I know every Black person in California or America, but that you can call me, because there's a hope that an NAACP or a BAPAC or somebody in our community is able to say, wait a second, is that sister so-and-so's son who's done this? Or is that so-and-so who's done that? Or if there is a beef in community, that we're able to be able to talk through it and solve it versus putting ourselves in hate. And one of the things that really, really, that I want to make sure also gets mentioned in this conversation is mainstream media's play on this and their role in some of this. I think I don't think that anybody probably missed, if you lived in the Northern California area, when we saw at the height of the pandemic, two African-American males pushed down elderly Asian Americans. And I want to just say, even though I don't speak for every Black person in the state of California or America, I can tell you, though, hands down, the way we grew up, the way I grew up in my community and the people that I know, there's no way we ever tolerate that. And the way that mainstream media, I feel, kept playing it over and over and over and over, it created and put a seated fear, even if that wasn't the intention, even if it was like, this is just horrible. The fear is that, oh my goodness, there's angry Black males out and I now need to be afraid. That is the furthest thing, the truth from African-American males. I've still wanted to be able to look deeper at what happened, like what Jan Wong just said. I want to know what happened in that. I want to know what was going on in that particular community to understand if there were also already tensions, or was this real hate? Was this the same thing if you're looking at the news and everything you hear is China is horrible, China is this, Russia is that. We're hearing this and it's being repeated. And we don't understand how that is playing out in communities to create this division that people just automatically have. So when they start blaming their problems, they blame it on, oh my gosh, it's something that my government said China did. So whenever I see someone who I believe might be Chinese and they don't know the difference, maybe sometimes between Chinese, Japanese, Korean, if they don't know the difference, right, then hate can actually live because mainstream media has a role in this. And I think that we have to make sure that we're bringing mainstream a part of this conversation, because we have to hold them accountable for the narratives. Even if they are true, they have to be true within context. And we have to make sure that we're doing our part to do that. I can do my part to make sure that our community is standing in solidarity and ensuring that we don't tolerate hate of any kind. That we can have dialogue and we can have disagreement with communities, but it doesn't have to be because of the race of someone's skin. And, I want to let everyone know here that, I am here to make sure that we have those conversations in context and that we're standing with all communities, but including our API community, so that they know that if they are experiencing this in community, that they have people that they can turn to, so that we could start having dialogue and conversation to get down to the bottom of what's really going on. So, I love to just open this up for questions because I felt like I love dialogue. I thought that was more of what we were going to be doing today, but I didn't have like a speech prepared. But I believe that, media really does play a part in making sure that we are able to see the other sides to community. Sandy Close, I'll end on this note. Sandy Close told me at one point, Regina, I'm so frustrated at the fact that, yes, there were African-American males in New York that had pushed someone off of a subway plank. But then there was also equally a story where someone else was there to actually save API woman. There's my own example. I used to frequent a hair place where I would go get my hair products. And I broke up a fight between an African-American woman and the store owner who he believed she was stealing. She probably shouldn't have acted the way that she did. I got in between them. I think they were kicking and everything. I believe I got kicked, but I got in between them and told her, you do not behave like this. This is not how you behave coming into someone's store. And I looked at him and said, look, let's figure out how to dial it down. I totally get, what's happening, but let's figure out how to dial it down. And so I just believe that we need people who are going to be able to step in and bridge the gap between communities whenever communication is not happening, or just the sense of not knowing the people and understanding the communities that we're serving, and really be able to tell those other stories so that we know that there's more people that are, ready to kick down the doors of hate and bring in a door of inclusion and open that door of inclusion. And so, my hope is that we're able to, that this is just one small step in us getting to a place of being able to do that.
Thank you so much, Regina, for your comments. May, do we have, and we got a little bit of time here, we can handle a question or two. Did you glean some from the chat?
Actually, our good friend Sandy Close has a question for each presenter. So Sandy, would you like to ask your questions, please? Ronnie, can you unmute Sandy?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for a very fascinating hour. I wanted to ask Mr. McMurrin if he has seen a growing willingness among communities targeted with hate incidents and hate crimes to report. Are you sensing that there's a growing willingness to report these incidents and crimes? And that was a question for you. A question for Jan Wong is, and this is difficult, but how do you monitor inter-ethnic, interracial conflicts within the sheriff's department? And have you seen any incidents? We've read about incidents in the past. Do you think the department has improved the interracial, interethnic dynamics among the law enforcement people? And finally, for Regina, how do we push beyond the negative stereotypes? Each of our media, often, sometimes unwittingly, but even through the repetitive use of photographs of this perpetrator against this victim, sort of perpetuate or expand the stereotypes that can often foster hate.
I can start. I think I don't have the statistics in front of me going back years. So I can just talk about the last year and couple months that I've been handling hate crimes in Orange County, and working with my other counterpart, William Ha, who we've split up Orange County and handle those jurisdictions. I don't know if I've seen an additional willingness in the last year, additional reports that have come through documenting hate crimes, but I see a lot. I get them weekly. We're getting lots of criminal reports sent to us, whether it's directly from the police agencies themselves identifying it as a potential hate crime, or a deputy district attorney who's reviewing a case that comes as a different crime, and they, as we've trained them, see cues that maybe this is at least a hate incident, and something that either myself or William Ha would want to look at to see if we can prove criminal charges of a hate crime. In all of those cases that we get, we document. We keep our own statistics on that, whether it's just a hate incident that we clarified it, or we actually then do file criminal charges. And if we file criminal hate crime charges in Orange County, me and William Ha are the only prosecutors who do those, who handle those cases. So I've seen a lot. I've seen lots of reports indicating hate crimes, but I can't say in the last year and a couple months that it's been going in one direction or another. But we do see people definitely willing to report crimes, and I believe we filed a lot of hate crimes in the last couple of years that we've had our hate crimes unit, more so than in the past. I don't know if that attributes to more reporting, attributes to us being better trained at identifying potential hate crimes versus incidents, or what that might be. But I haven't seen it, other than the public not having an inclination to bring law enforcement into their lives, and the delay that it caused by reporting a potential crime. Besides that, I haven't seen an unwillingness to report hate crimes.
Thank you. And Ms. Wong.
Okay, Sandy, so can you just verify, when you mean like within the department, you mean as like employees of the department?
Yes,
Or...
I mean racial incidents of racial animosity, hate between members of the department.
Okay, I can't speak for that necessarily. I don't, if you, for numbers or statistics or anything like that, since, we don't handle that, that's going to be more of a personnel issue. However, we do have a lot of policies in place, that, where that's not tolerated, to discriminate or treat someone a certain way because of their race, ethnicity, gender, etc. However, I don't really have numbers in regards to if that occurs or whatever, but I do know, speaking from personal experience, it's not anything that I've ever experienced, but I can't say what the official, numbers are in regards to that, since for us as hate crimes, we don't handle that aspect. That would probably be more of an administrative or personnel issue.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Wilson, how do we get beyond the stereotypes we media often unwittingly perpetuate?
Well, I think we have to hold each other accountable. So we have to, I think through Ethnic Media Services, I think that is an umbrella that captures all of us. And I think that we all have to be prepared and ready that if I do something that seemed like a stereotype or someone else does something as a stereotype, we need to have an open door and be able to listen and take corrective constructive criticism so that we don't do it to ourselves. But I think we also need, like I said, to hold mainstream media accountable. And I know that some communities, not every community has the ability to do this, but those public affairs officers within, cable news, we probably need, if they're in our community, we need to hold them accountable, asking them to sit back and listen to the community, form a, informal task force that makes sure that that when we see something that is really lazy journalism, even on the mainstream media's part, I think that we have to make sure that we call them out on it, and we have to make sure that it gets corrected.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Regina. Thank you to our presenters today. Maymay, did you have any final comments you want to make before I do the close and the wrap up?
We do
You have
have
one more
two
question. Oh, you had one more question. I was going to just tell you. Sorry.
It's okay. There are two more questions in the chat. So how do you want to handle it? Should we just answer their questions?
We're at 12 o'clock now. I think we need to respect the time. If you
Okay,
think
then
you have time,
we
you're
will
welcome.
follow up. We will follow up with an answer back to them. But with that, I would like to say that for people who are attending or have attended today's event, please make sure you are putting your contact information in the chat box, because we will send out a follow-up email to everyone. So make sure you have left your email address to us. Thank you.
So thanks again to our presenters. Thank you for the audience for being here for the first of our series. We hope that you found it thought-provoking, and perhaps you have learned some other resources you can have as you're going out there and doing coverage. I'd like to challenge our media audience to look for and to identify more hate crimes and incidents. And as we learned from our deputy DA, it's kind of a fine line, right? It goes to bias, it goes to intent. Well, how do you know somebody's mind? How do you know they pushed that person out in the street because it was a female or an Asian or a Black person? I mean, but as we report more on this, we embolden people to speak up. And I think that is the real value of the media. You are the spotlight on happenings. You are the megaphone. You get it out to people. And by you speaking up and people speaking up and you rebroadcasting that, it empowers those who might be more timid. And the detective talked about Asians are reluctant to speak out. And that is true. Many of you are Asian media, and you know that just the community as a general prefers to keep their head down and just try to stay out of harm's way. But when we do speak out, it emboldens others to speak up as well. So I encourage you to do that as one of our solutions to helping end hate crimes, or at least significantly reducing it. So again, our profuse thanks to David McMurrin, Jan Wong, Regina Wilson. Without your thought-provoking comments, we wouldn't have been able to have this today. Our next meeting will be October 12th. You will notice our meetings will be the second Wednesday of each month at 11 a.m. And I want to thank you for attending. That concludes today's program.
Thank you.